I remember the impact more than anything, the way my body was thrown sideways, harness straps biting into my shoulders as alarm screamed in my ears. The shuttle's hull groaned like a dying animal before the swamp swallowed us whole. When I came to, the world was a blur of green shadows and rotting water. My leg was twisted at an angle it shouldn't have been, and each breath tasted like rust and mold. I tried to move, but the pain was blinding. The emergency beacon was nothing more than a dead, flickering light. I was alone. Or so I thought. They appeared out of the mist, tall, fluid-limbed figures walking with a strange, deliberate grace. The Kashari. Their skin was a lattice of coral-like ridges, glistening with the damp air. 6 arms moved like the currents of deep water, and their eyes were pools of shifting color, impossible to look away from. One crouched beside me, clicking softly in a language I didn't understand, before lifting me as though I weighed nothing. They didn't speak my words, but they didn't need to. I understood kindness when I saw it. They built a sling from woven reeds, carried me on their backs across mudflats and through swarms of biting insects. At night, they lit fires with stones that sparkled like stars, feeding me strange, fragrant roots. I was half delirious from fever, but I remember the way Elder Vary, bigger than the others, with a face like carved stone, would place a hand on my chest to check my breathing before settling beside the fire. 10 days we traveled. 10 days of storms, sinking ground, and the sound of distant predators howling in the dark. When we finally reached a relay station and the medevac came, I swore I'd never forget them. Elder Vary only nodded and said, "Debts of life are not measured in time." 15 years can turn even the sharpest memories soft at the edges, but I never forgot the Kashari. Sometimes, during long patrols in the outer sectors, I'd catch a glimpse of a misty world through the viewport and think of coral eyes in the fog. By then, I'd risen to captain of the Resolute *, a Terran-free Navy corvette. We fought skirmishes along disputed borders, escorted convoys through pirate space, and dealt with a kind of politics that always seemed to make war feel more like business. The Kashari were a distant echo, part of a story I told younger crew when they asked about my scars. That changed the moment the transmission came through. At first, it was barely more than static, soft crackles against the hum of the ship. I almost ignored it. Then a voice broke through, fragile but steady, and my heart stopped. Elder Vary. His speech had the same slow rhythm I remembered, though now every word was strained. Kashari waters run red. The Vigran fleets have come. We cannot flee, help us. I froze at the helm, every instinct screaming at me to plot a course. But the Vigran were no small-time raiders. They were an organized slaver empire, infamous for burning entire civilizations to the ground. Their fleets operated far beyond human-controlled space. No official mission had ever reached their territory and returned intact. When I brought it to command, they didn't even pretend to consider it. "We can't risk a ship that far out for an alien clan," they said, as though the Kashari were nothing more than a statistic. Orders were clear, ignore the call. I didn't. We broke from formation that night, silent running through black space. One ship against an empire. It was madness, but the promise I'd made all those years ago left no room for hesitation. The 4th day of travel brought us into Kashari space, and the sight that met us was worse than anything I had imagined. The sky above their ocean world was a deep, angry crimson, lit by burning wreckage falling through the atmosphere. Great pillars of smoke rose from the floating villages, vast platforms lashed together and anchored to the backs of gargantuan sea beasts. Some of those beasts thrashed in agony, their harnesses ablaze, while others floated lifeless, dragging the villages down into boiling waters. The Vigran blockade hung in orbit like a net of steel and fire. Their warships were black, jagged things, bristling with gunmetal fangs. We didn't slow down. I ordered every railgun hot, missile bays loaded, and engines pushed to their limits. The Resolute tore through their formation, the first salvo punching clean through a destroyer's spine. The shockwave lit the void in pale blue light, and for a brief moment I saw Vigran ships hesitate. We didn't get through unscathed. 2 frigates clipped our shields, and a torpedo burst ripped through our port armor. Warning lights bled red across my console, but I couldn't stop. Down below, I could see Kashari ships, little more than armed fishing skiffs, scrambling to defend their civilians, utterly outmatched. Our assault opened a gap just long enough for the Kashari to begin their evacuation, shepherding their people onto the surviving sea beasts and guiding them toward the deeper currents where the Vigran's larger ships couldn't follow. Even then, I knew it wasn't enough. The Vigran fleet was regrouping, heavier ships moving into position. We were a mosquito biting a giant, and sooner or later, they'd swat us from the sky. Elder Vari's voice came over the comm, calm as a tide. "You came. That is more than most." It was both a blessing and a warning. That night, we drifted in the shadow of a shattered moon, our hull scorched and patched with emergency seals. The Vigran had pulled back to regroup, but we knew they'd be back with more firepower than we could dream of resisting. The crew was exhausted, bruised, and running on adrenaline. My XO, Cade, leaned over the holotable, scanning the tactical readouts with a grim face. "One ship won't hold this line," he said. He didn't need to convince me, I already knew. So I did the only thing left to do. I opened a secure comm channel, bypassing official networks entirely, and reached into every shadowed corner of space I'd ever traveled. I sent the message to smugglers who'd run blockade runners beside me, to mercenaries I'd once bought drinks for after bloody skirmishes, to asteroid miners who'd fought pirates with mining lasers. I sent it to outposts so small they didn't even show up on most star charts. But I didn't just talk to the people who owed me, I talked to the people who didn't. I told them about the Kashari, about the 10 days they carried me through swamps while predators howled in the dark, about how they'd saved a 17-year-old human who was nothing to them. I ended it with the only words that mattered. The Kashari saved a human once. If you can hear this, come repay the debt. When the signal went out, silence followed. Hours passed. The crew tried not to look at me, as if my desperation might be contagious. Outside, the wreckage of Kashari ships drifted like grave markers. Cade finally asked, "What if no one comes?" I didn't answer. In truth, I didn't know. All I had was faith, and the memory of coral eyes watching over me in the dark. It began with a single ping on long-range sensors, faint and almost lost in the static of the debris field. Cade leaned forward, frowning. Unregistered freighter, coming in fast. I felt a spark of something I hadn't let myself feel in days, hope. Minutes later, a second contact appeared. Then 3 more. By the next hour, the sensor display was littered with blips. When the first ships broke through the atmosphere's upper haze, my breath caught. They weren't Navy vessels. Most were never built for combat at all. A deep space cargo hauler with jury-rigged armor plating and missile pods welded to its flanks. A fishing trawler whose nets had been replaced with railgun arrays. Mining barges with plasma cutters mounted like cannons. They came in every size and shape, engines roaring, hulls scarred from old battles or hard living. Then the comms lit up, dozens of voices, human voices, filling the bridge. Some I recognized instantly, others I'd never met, but every one of them said the same thing in their own way. They saved a human once, we're here to repay the debt. More ships poured in until the horizon was a living wall of steel and light. Merchant captains from trade routes I'd long forgotten. Outer Rim prospectors who'd once shared a drink with me in rusted cantinas. Even an old pirate whose life I'd spared years back. The Vigran must have thought this ragtag fleet was nothing more than a mob of fools. They moved to engage immediately, confident in their discipline and numbers. We proved them wrong in the first volley. Coordinated or not, every human ship that could fire did, and the Vigran's forward line disintegrated under the sheer ferocity of it. For the first time since arriving, I felt the balance shift. We weren't alone anymore. The battle was nothing like the clean simulations we'd run back in the Navy. It was raw, chaotic, and loud enough to make the deck plates hum under my boots. Our ragtag fleet surged forward in waves, scattering formation charts and textbook tactics in favor of pure aggression. Cargo haulers charged headlong into Vigran cruisers, slamming them with missile barrages before peeling away under covering fire from modified prospecting ships. Old frigates, their paint worn to bare metal, darted through gaps like knife blades, punching holes in the enemy's flanks. The Vigran flagship was a monstrous thing, sleek and black, with a prow shaped like a predator's skull. It moved methodically, cutting down smaller human ships with brutal precision. I knew we had to break it or risk losing the momentum we'd fought so hard for. I rallied a strike group, 6 ships willing to risk everything, and we drove straight at it. Railgun slugs tore through its outer armor, and plasma beams carved glowing scars along its hull. The Vigran answered with a storm of fire, and one by one, I watched my allies vanish in blooms of flame. Still, we didn't turn away. The Resolute ***'s main guns punched through the flagship's forward magazine, and the detonation lit the void like a second sun. That was the breaking point. The rest of the Vigran fleet faltered, their formation collapsing into scattered retreat. Victory didn't taste like celebration, it tasted like blood and smoke. 3 ships from our makeshift armada were gone completely, their crews nothing more than names we'd carry forever. On the comms, voices called roll, check survivors, and searched for the missing. But when the last Vigran vessel fled into the dark, I knew one thing for certain: the Kashari would live to see another sunrise. When the last echoes of battle faded, the silence felt heavier than the fighting. Wreckage drifted in slow arcs through the upper atmosphere, some of it still glowing from the heat of Reentree. The surviving human ships hung in loose formation, their hulls scorched, their engines limping. Below, the Kashari world was scarred but still alive, its seas dark and restless, its surviving floating villages gathering together like wounded animals seeking comfort. We landed the Resolute on one of the larger platforms, its coral-like decking creaking beneath the weight. Kashari of every age emerged from the smoke, warriors with armor cracked and scorched, elders leaning on carved staff blades, children clinging to their parents' arms. Elder Vari was among them, taller than I remembered, his ridged skin now marked with deep battle scars. He stepped forward without hesitation, placing 2 of his 6 hands on my shoulders. "You came," he said simply. His eyes glimmered, not with the wild colors I remembered, but with something softer. "And you brought the sea with you." I looked back toward the horizon, where human ships still hovered like guardian spirits. They had come from every corner of known space, some never having met the Kashari, all risking their lives because of a story and a promise. The Kashari began to chant, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the platform. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. Gratitude. Acknowledgement. Bond. Later, when we lifted off to escort the remaining Vigran stragglers out of the system, I knew the debt between us was no longer one-sided. The Kashari had saved a human once, and humanity had answered in kind. In the black between stars, debts of life aren't measured in time, they're measured in who shows up when it matters most.